Hello and welcome back to A Fall from Grace. We will be continuing where we left off, which, if you recall, is after Blake and Ridley got themselves caught because they were unfortunately a little too greedy and a little too, distracted, and they didn't really realize that they were being tailed, or probably being tailed. I don't know, because the guards suddenly just sort of came out of nowhere and, caught them by surprise. And it kind of seems like they were already sort of waiting for them. So, Salvon was able to escape, so I'm assuming they will be able to rescue them? I don't know. So far, Selwyn, Hollis, Dion, Cedric, and Vincent have not been caught, but if these two guys were already caught, then what is the likelihood that the rest won't be? If they're not being careful. What else? Cedric met Hortense, and I still don't remember the other girl's name, who were the people that were dancing with him, actually, in the past, when he was at another, ball, or whatever it was, with Lysander. And these are the two girls that Lysander was super jealous of, because Cedric got along really well with them. So, it's kind of weird that they're showing up again. So, Also, he met another woman who seemed very familiar to him, but he can't quite place who it was, or who it is, I mean. So, But yeah. Anywho, so if I recall correctly, this is either the second to the last or the third to the last update for A Fall from Grace. So yeah, which I guess means we're getting towards the climax. Anywho, so yeah, without further ado, let us continue A Fall from Grace. Are you a tea drinker yourself, Hector? Alas, it has been far too long since I had the pleasure of tasting tea of a fine quality. We must remedy this. I'm well acquainted with the owner of this estate, and they know I prefer a quiet evening as opposed to the chaos of the ballroom. This way, sir. Victor and the group of nobles had left through a door to the right of the main hall, next to the imposing staircase, and now found themselves in a dimly lit corridor whose walls were covered in dark mahogany. Forgive me, what did you say the room that we're heading to was again? It is a very cozy living room, with large windows overlooking the gardens. It was purposefully designed as a perfect spot for a delicious afternoon tea. Or rather evening tea in today's case. We're well aware of it is a little unorthodox. I really don't mind, gentlemen. An old friend of mine, I still visit twice a year, also enjoys his tea in the evenings, thus I've grown accustomed to the idea. Just over to your right now, sir. The fox followed the rooster's instructions and turned into another dark and endless corridor. Despite having carefully studied the map earlier, this estate felt so much more immense in person. The others weren't lying. He did recall seeing a large living room in the rear of the building in the maps Hollis and Blake had stolen. It was then that he noticed that they weren't alone anymore. A single guard had appeared at the end of the corridor, standing next to the door, which no doubt belonged to the room that they were looking for. There was nothing out of the ordinary about this, and yet Victor began to feel a sense of unease slowly creeping up his back. It was only when the rooster overtook him without warning and blocked his path that he realized that something was deeply wrong about this whole scenario. Hands behind your back, fox. Victor rapidly turned to look past the three bulls behind him, searching for an escape route. That's when he saw that they'd revealed the weapons that they'd been concealing. Pistols, knives, batons, and even brass knuckles. I wouldn't try anything funny if I were you. He felt the thick rope being slipped and tightened around his wrists. Who are you? Guards? The others laughed as they surrounded him. Off with your mask now. The rooster ripped Victor's mask off with such force that it flew across the corridor and hit the walls' wooden panels. What do you want from... He wasn't able to finish his sentence. One of the bulls struck him across the muzzle with his brass knuckles. The pain was atrocious. He stumbled to his knees and lifted his hands to his chin. Bright red blood was spilling onto his white gloves. There was another thud. He'd been struck by one of the heavy batons. He fell forwards onto the ground, whimpering. That's when he received a heavy kick to the stomach. All the air inside of him was forced out. Easy now, boys. What for? Dark orange fur coat? Dark brown hair. This has to be the right one. We went easy on the others already. Fine, as you will. But if I wanted unbridled violence, I'd attended a feral cockfight rather than this pitiful show. The guard nearby stepped forward, picking Victor up from the ground. He opened the door and dragged the fox into the dark room beyond it, throwing him onto the floor. We'll be seeing you at the gallows, Victor. Pray your death is a painless one. The last thing that he heard was a click accompanied by the jangle of a bunch of keys locking him inside. Back outside, Hollis noticed a group of servants stepping out onto the open entrance to the kitchen. They were whispering amongst themselves with some animosity, probably just some new household gossip, the tiger thought. His heart sank the moment that he distinctly heard the words burglars coming out of the youngest boy's mouth. He walked up to them and quickly got their attention. Excuse me, did I hear talk of burglars just now? Aye, sir. I just heard the guards caught 2 of them upstairs. They'd managed to get inside the treasury and were taking all the objects that they could. Bloody cheek that they got to. Would that I were brave or foolish enough to do summat like that. Though I can't say that it don't serve the master's right to get burgled. The group let out a loud laugh, in case Hollis had any doubt whether they liked their employers or not, that was quickly answered. Who were these rogues? Have you heard anything about them? One of them was dressed in red, the other is a creamy brown costume, both armed to the teeth, one of the guards told me. The one in red was a violent dog with the sharpest fangs and a face so terrifying, it's a miracle that they stopped him. The other was a brawny bear, white shoulders, and a large build, the sort of type that you don't want to cross alone at night. Despite the exaggerations, it was crystal clear who they were talking about. Hollis felt like punching himself. Blake and Riley had been caught whilst he was trapped outside, unable to help them. They looked so full of joy earlier. Knowing that they were at the guard's mercy felt so much worse when he could recall their hopeful words and expressions. Samhain was safe at least, as far as he could tell. He needed to wait for the cat so that they could have someone else to talk to. This was to avoid making any rash decisions he'd come to regret. He couldn't stand the growing anxiety for much longer. Something had to be done. He'd wait 10 more minutes and then head inside to look for the rest of the group. As for the house cat, he'd busy himself by wandering the entire first floor of the mansion. He'd managed to avoid bumping into the guards that he'd met earlier and was just about considering heading back downstairs when he happened upon a room that had slipped him by until then. The door had been left slightly ajar, allowing him to catch a glimpse of a private study from where he stood. After listening out for anything suspicious and having determined that there were no guards nearby, he snuck into this new room and closed the door behind him. Following this small build-up, the room's contents felt very anticlimactic. The decor was rather drab and none of the objects lying on the central table looked particularly valuable. Yet Samhain much preferred a room like this to the rest of the estate. It felt more intimate and cozy, tucked away amongst the endless corridors. A number of thick logs were burning merrily in the fireplace. It looks like someone was here only an hour ago, the cat thought to himself. Then he glanced at the pieces of parchment that had been left on the table and froze. A map of the building just like the one that Blake and Hollis had stolen from the town archives was staring back at him. Before he could even try telling himself that this wasn't unusual, he noticed a number of handwritten asterisks inscribed across the map, each placed close to the staircase, the end of a corridor, and to an exit. There had to be a logical explanation for this, and yet Selwyn's heart began to beat faster. He pushed the map aside, revealing a number of dirty papers beneath. A list of food for the ball, another list of general expenses, a sketch of a mask and costume. Selwyn's eyes widened as he read an official-looking letter. Dear Sir, we have received the previously agreed upon sum of £5 this morning. I will make sure you have at least 50 of my men at your disposal for the duration of the event. Yours faithfully, Captain E. Rackham. No, there's no way. Beneath it all, one more letter with a different handwriting, a reply which hadn't been posted yet. Captain Rackham, I extend my heartfelt thanks for your generous assistance in bringing these dangerous criminals to justice. His heart skipped a beat. Your loyal servant, Lysander Brandthrust. The musicians were halfway throughout the set when Cedric realized that he'd never openly danced with another man before. To be honest, he still couldn't be sure of his current partner's gender, but even if you were to replace man with male-presenting person, his previous thought would still stand. It felt liberating, especially considering that he was no longer hidden in the woods, far away from civilization, but in the middle of a giant estate belonging to a wealthy family. There were no embarrassments or shame to be felt. Everything is permitted at a masquerade ball, with the comforting thought that all of society's rigid rules would be enforced again come morning. This was a haven of self-expression in a judgmental world. The couple glided across the ballroom with a sense of ease. Each other's steps felt natural, almost weightless. Something about this, he knew not what, felt oddly familiar. He couldn't help but imagine Victor's face beneath that bird-like mask. How gracefully they moved, how gently they held them. This was beginning to feel supernatural. The coyote exhaled loudly. Now wasn't the time to be thinking such nonsense. Clearly the only explanation was that they were both well accustomed to their dance steps. Cedric and the stranger drew close. Now was the time to act. He raised his left arm above his head, taking hold of their gloved hand again. Glancing downward, he noticed that the silk purse that he had been eyeing had disappeared. Opening any of the other leather purses fastened to their belt would take too long. He needed to think quickly. He smoothly slid his right hand into their largest leather pocket. To his surprise, it was empty. Or was it? No, there was something inside it after all. He felt it. There it was, the silk purse from earlier. It felt lighter than expected. The moment that he moved away from the pocket was when the stranger grabbed his hand. Cedric almost jumped. Why the sudden gesture? Had he been caught? The musicians had begun to play a different tune, and his partner was leading him into this new dance. That was the most logical explanation. These thoughts were dashed when the stranger picked up and then gradually lowered the purse into the coyote's palm. With nary a spoken word, their message was crystal clear. Open it. Cedric was beginning to sweat. His breaths were loud under his mask. He did as he was told. He opened the purse, feeling around for its contents. Inside was a single tiny object, no larger than a chess piece. In fact, it was one, a piece that he was too familiar with that had been missing for quite some time. A white knight. The stranger leaned towards him so that their masks were almost touching. Cedric could now see the pair of familiar eyes hidden behind the stranger's disguise. He was met with a fiery gaze with enough raw power to burn his skin off. It's time to come home, Cedric. I've captured the others. My guards have that disgusting fox locked up. He refused to believe what he was hearing. No, you're lying. It's not true. Cedric stepped back, but to no avail. Lysander forcefully yanked onto his costume and pulled him back in. You wanted to dance with me, did you not? Let me go, please. You wouldn't want to cause a scene now, would you? Cedric lowered his head. He kept on dancing despite not being able to feel his feet nor any other part of his body anymore. There's a good boy. Where was Victor? What had happened to the others? Lie. You can't. You mustn't. Hold your tongue. That tail razor will be dangling from the gallows in a matter of hours. And yet, you might still have a chance to save his life. Come quietly. Do as I say. Start a new life together with me. And I'll spare him. Cedric shook himself free from Lysander's grasp. Never. He needed to get away, to escape while he still could. Lysander didn't give chase, but replied by roaring after Cedric in blind rage. Go ahead then, run. I know you'll come back. That monster was right. It was too late already. There was nowhere to escape to. He was trapped. Just as Hollis was about to give up on waiting, he noticed Selwyn rushing down the steps of the main entrance. He waved to get his attention. Sel, over here. The cat was out of breath from running. He grabbed onto the tiger as he caught up with the other to avoid falling over. We need to act quickly, or we'll be done for. Hollis whispered. Blake and Ridley have been nabbed. Shit. Jeeves, this is worse than I imagined. Hang that stupid names. What is it? Have you seen Cedric? No. Selwyn produced and unfolded some scrunched up papers that he had been carrying. I found these on a desk in the private chambers upstairs. Tonight, the mansion, the ball. It was all a giant setup. That's not possible. Do you know who owns this estate? Who? Don't just stand there. Tell me, for heaven's sake. Hollis shook him with such force that Kat's wig was about to fall off. It's Lysander. Not him directly, but a branch of his family owns his property. No. There's just no way. We couldn't have missed that. We would have recognized the family name. That's why I said that it was a different branch. It's not the same surname. He planned all of this. He financed over 50 guards, some of them disguised as attendees. He wants to throw us all in jail and execute Victor. How the fuck did Cedric not know about this place? Wasn't he best friends with that piece of shit? I don't know. I just hope that he hasn't got his hands on anyone else. I have a clue as to where they're keeping Blake and Rid, at least. With trembling hands, he flicked through the papers. Come on. Here. It's in the sketch of this plan for tonight. All other bandits except for the Fox are to be taken to the morning room or the library. There's 2 rooms. Which one is it? Don't yell at me, I don't know. We'll have to find out and pray that they're lucky. Hollis nodded. He was trying to take some larger breaths to ease his nerves. I'm sorry. What about Vic? Should they capture him? Where will they take him? I couldn't find that in the notes. That lying bastard's the only one who will know, most likely. We need to find Dion and show him these papers. Hopefully, he'll manage to tell Victor and Cedric to make a run for it. Then we rescue Blake and Rid and get the fuck out of here. Selwyn was still panting. I just need to catch my breath for a moment. Sel, we don't have time. I'm sorry. Hollis sprinted up the stairs to the main entrance, flashing past the bewildered servants at the front door. Selwyn followed, using all of his strength to keep up without tripping on the huge ball gown. Cedric was busy wandering the ground floor aimlessly. Time and space meant nothing to him anymore. It felt like he was walking around a giant theatrical set. All guests around him had been mere background characters this whole time, unknowingly participating in this plot against him. That's what this estate has been since he got here, an artificial illusion, the backdrop to a nearly reconstructed plan, every scene the result of an insane lion's obsession. He tried focusing on any person or object in his vicinity, but everything felt distorted and unreal. Echoes of Lysander's voice filled his mind, drowning out any other thought. Had he actually done it? Had he captured all the others? There was still a chance that he might be bluffing. The coyote's head felt like it was about to explode. Of course, a mansion near Hiltsford, one of his family's endless properties. He was a complete idiot. Why didn't he look into who the owners were? Perhaps then he wouldn't have let himself, his partner, and his friends fall into what should have been the most obvious trap. And yet, how could he know? Lysander was obsessive and controlling, sure, but Cedric hadn't anticipated that he would be crazy enough to organize something on such a scale. What for? Just to have him back in his life? Was that lion actually in love with him? If one could even dare call this love, no, this was infatuation. How long had he been planning this? Just how many people had he involved? Had he purposely invited Elizabeth and Hortense by sending them an anonymous letter? What about the older woman? The fact her voice sounded familiar was no longer a strange coincidence. If only he could stop his mind from leaping to the only possible conclusion. That icy, distant tone, the talk of children being a disappointment. Cedric felt his entire body shake. He danced with his own mother. Lysander has planned it all. He blinked. He'd briefly returned to his senses just enough to notice that he was standing at the top of the grand staircase. Looking down at the main hall from where he stood, he desperately tried to find someone that he recognized in the crowd. No one. Before him was a sea of dark and out-of-focus shapes scurrying across the marble floor like ants. Dion, where are you? Victor. The image of the four nobles leading the fox away from the ballroom slowly and inevitably appeared before his eyes. As much as he tried, he couldn't unsee it. What have they done to him? He wanted to cry out for help, but his mouth was sealed shut. He couldn't move. It felt like he was about to stop breathing. He stumbled backwards and slammed into a hanging tapestry and the wooden panels behind it. He was trapped in a lonely fight against the panic attack that he knew was approaching. It was a lost cause. His breaths grew frantic. A pain the likes of which he'd never felt was forming in his chest. Lysander was right. There was no escape from this. All his worst fears were realized. This was hell on earth. He threw his left hand onto a table just a few inches from where he stood to save himself from collapsing onto the ground. He hardly noticed he'd sent a brass candelabra hurtling towards the wooden floor. He heard a metallic clang. It bounced and landed at the center of a dark red carpet. A flame grew and engulfed the fabric, but Cedric was still completely unable to react. He could see that what was happening, what he'd just done, but his mind was unable to put two and two together. It was only when the fire spread to the nearby curtains and furniture, when its smoke caused him to cough loudly, that his instincts kicked in. Fuck, what have I done? He ran for the staircase. The crowd of guests had begun to murmur. Some thought that they could smell smoke, some swore that they'd caught sight of it. Once the flames became visible from the ground floor, the murmuring got louder. Cedric felt the air move as heaps of servants rushed past him, carrying buckets of water, and then again as they run back the way that they came from, having discovered the fire that had already grown too big to be put out easily. None of the guests had left the building, believing that it was only a matter of time before the situation would be back under control. The staff, on the other hand, were in complete chaos. Most were still attempting to put out the fire, others had been tasked with grabbing what they could to save from the most important rooms on the first floor. Everyone seemed to be madly rushing about, with the exception of the coyote. He'd slowed down again and could barely reach the bottom of the stairs. Music could still be heard coming from the ballroom, where dozens upon dozens of guests were still merely unaware of anything that had gone wrong. Cedric coughed again, and the moment that he brought his hand to his muzzle, he noticed his hat and mask had fallen off. He glanced up at the far end of the balcony, which was now engulfed in bright flames. There was no chance of him getting back there, not that it mattered anymore. A servant cut through the tense atmosphere, yelling out so that all could hear him. Having mentioned that they could no longer contain the fire and that it could soon reach the ground floor, he encouraged each guest to grab their belongings and evacuate the premise. This was the moment when curiosity turned into panic. Some guests hurried into the ballroom to warn their friends and acquaintances of the fire, bumping into each other on the way. Others were fighting both tooth and claw to reach the tiny cloakroom. Grabbing their hats and cloaks would be essential if they wanted to survive the snowstorm outside. Arguments and fistfights broke out. Drinks were dropped during the panic, which caused many to lose their balance and slip on their way to the exit. An old woman was injured from her fall, after which some of the staff were forced to step in to try to coordinate guests on their way out. Cedric, there you are. Didn't you hear what they said? We need to get out of here before the fire spreads. He's not well. Though Cedric's vision was still blurry, he recognized Elizabeth's costume and mask. Easy now. Take some deep breaths. You're all right, Cedric. Everything is all right. He finally managed a long breath. Hortense took hold of him and sat him down on a nearby chair. We're here for you. Cedric's vision was getting clearer. At last, he was able to focus on the objects and people closest to him. The pain was subsiding. He felt his mind lighter. He closed his eyes and let out a long and raspy sigh. Liz, Hortense, thank you. What happened? Were you upstairs when the fire broke out? All of a sudden, it felt like the coyote's brain had been fired up as twice as its usual speed. I need your help. Have you seen a group of 4 men? One of them a rooster, and the others are bulls. Come on, Cedric. Is this really the moment for such talk? We need... Hortense interrupted her friend. Yes, as a matter of fact, we have. I noticed them speaking to a number of different guests earlier, all of them foxes. It struck me as quite odd. We don't have time for this. Liz, if he's asking, it must be important. Don't you understand? The doe folded her arms. Fine. Where did they take them? I have no idea. Since we're on the subject, I saw them walking over to the door down a number of times. Elizabeth pointed to the door Victor had been led through earlier. What is going on? What does this matter? Lysander is here. He set me up. I thought that I'd escape his clutches, started a new life. Cedric stood up from the chair. I have someone that I need to save, someone he's captured and wants dead. Don't you dare go off running by your own. You don't understand, if you're going to do something risky, you'll need someone to come with you. Exactly. He smiled. These two had been nothing but good to him since the moment that they'd met. And they were right. There was always strength in numbers. I don't know what I could have possibly done to deserve this. Follow me. The atmosphere in the library was completely opposite of what it was in the main hall. The logs in the fireplace were burning merrily, leading to a warm and lived-in feel to the tiny room. Yet all of it was not as idyllic as it seemed. What was usually a space reserved for reading or discussing books and authors with household guests was now being used as a makeshift cell to store Ridley and Blake until the night was over. The bandits had been thrown on a pair of chairs facing each other and firmly tied in place. The two sentinels were keeping watch, one on each side of the door. Both Ridley and Blake had scanned the room multiple times, hoping to find some helpful tool or clue to a secret passage amongst the many bookshelves so tall that they could almost reach the ceiling. A series of busts above them, matching those that could be seen in the rest of the house, tauntingly stared back at them. There was nothing unusual about the wooden library steps propped up against the furniture, nor the grandfather clock ticking away between the shelves. Trying his best to keep his mood from tanking, Blake looked up at the busts touching the ceiling. Who the fuck is Empedocles? I don't know about you, but I think that he might have been Greek. The brainless comments like these were the only thing saving them from despair in the situation. I had a hunch that he might be Greek given his name was Empedocles and not Kevin fucking Robinson. The Doberman let out a gentle, quietly desperate laugh. All right then, I demand a list of all the philosophers that you're aware of. Oh, you want to feel better than me, do you? Just wait and see. Plato, there's one. Ridley nodded. Aristotle. Damn, I'm impressed. Thomas Hobbes. Hang on, how the fuck do you know who that is? Says it right there, under that bust. Both bandits broke out in laughter. Fuck all the way off. You were reading them out the whole time? It's being called quick-witted, my dear. A skill you've benefited from, no doubt. The two locked eyes, and for a moment, silence lingered in the room. Do you think that this is it? For us, I mean? I don't know. It might be. Blake sighed. Ridley, whatever happens, just know that you mean the world to me. Thank you for seeing something in this wreck of a dog. It's comforting knowing someone believes in me. I wish that I could. I lived my whole life wanting to make my old man proud, to show he didn't die for nothing. If he knew that I'd end up at the gallows, just like him. He shook his head, trying his hardest to suppress his tears. Please, you mustn't think like that. There's no one else out there as honest and as charming, as kind-hearted as you are. I never got the chance to tell my dad how much I loved him. Something stirred in the dog then, a longing for a missed opportunity that he wouldn't pass up again. I love you, Ridley. Blake, I love you too. Ridley felt the urge to break free from the ropes binding him, to leap out of his seat and run into the Doberman's arms. He tried to vividly picture this in his imagination. Even just a little was essential. I should be thanking you for always being there for me and for putting up with all my flaws. Who says I put up with them? The bear snorted. Bitch. There was a knock at the door. This caused the guard in the library, who dozed off a couple of minutes earlier during Ridley and Blake's banter, to awaken with a jolt. Huh? What on earth? Who goes there? The guard opened the heavy wooden door to reveal a masked Selwyn carrying a silver tray with a couple of glasses on the other side. What? I thought Kenneth was out here. I haven't seen anyone nearby, dear. The cat stepped inside, bold as brass. Ma'am, I must object to your presence here. I've been given orders to... Oh, hang orders. You must be dying for a drink, all cooped up in here as you are. Well, As a matter of fact, some of your companions sent me to look for you. Here, have some sherry. Unable to get a word in edgewise, the guard grumbled and picked up one of the glasses. This is awfully suspicious, you know. You must be bored out of your mind. Selwyn lifted up his ball gown to reveal a glimpse of his stockings underneath. Perhaps I can change that? The guard almost spat out his drink and turned his head to his right in an attempt to avoid drenching the cat. That was all Selwyn needed. With a movement so rapid that it was nigh invisible, he decked the guard in the jaw, knocking him onto the floor with a loud thump. Neither Blake nor Ridley were able to contain their excitement at this turn of events. It was a feeling of great pride indeed, knowing any member of the masquerade was capable of performing an impromptu rescue mission like this. Fuck me, that was a punch and a half. Stunning work, Sal. How long have you been holding on to that strength? In a flash, the house cat ran up to Blake and began to meticulously untie the rope. That'll take ages. Aye, don't you think using a knife would be faster? Look, I only have a pocket knife on me. I'll never cut through this rope. Ridley chose to poke him a little, despite or perhaps because of the tense atmosphere. Just say that you'd rather preserve it for the next time that you need to use it on one of us. Selwyn pointed a finger at him jokingly. Shut the fuck up. You'd probably have gotten off to being captured and tied up, you little Blake had been freed before reaching the end of the sentence. Impressive. Less than 20 seconds later, Selwyn helped a freed Ridley to his feet. What's our escape plan? We don't have one. Are the others safe? I'm afraid that I don't know. Hollis and I split up. He's gone searching for Dion, Sed, and Rick. Ridley threw one of the larger windows open. A gust of cold wind blew into the warm room, putting out the fire. Gang, how do we feel about making our way back to the carriage to the gardens and getting the fuck out of here? Blake got a running start and leapt out through the windowsill. Approved! He was followed by his lover and lastly, the less agile Selwyn, who slowly sat himself on the windowsill, got his gown caught on a piece of furniture, and tumbled to the ground, tearing through his costume. Blake rushed over to pick him up, rolling his eyes. Fuck's sake, Selwyn. You do something impressive and then end it on that. I'm fine, by the way. In the room to the opposite end of the house, the silence was unbearable. Victor waited for any sound, a cough, a loud breath, a spoken word. Nothing. Just the sight of the two tiny flames nearby. They belonged to a pair of thick candles the guards had left on a wooden table. If it hadn't been for them, the room would have been shrouded in complete darkness. It was thanks to its light that he discovered that he wasn't alone, as he first thought. He'd been left to share the space with 7 other people, most of whom were foxes, each of them sitting or lying on the floor. The flame had grown tall and its movements frenzied. The faces of those closest to him were clearly visible. As for any other details, the majority of the room's contents remained a mystery. A velvet-covered canopy, an armchair with its little footstool, and a little coffee table were the only objects whose existence one could be certain of, looking like theatrical props that had been discarded backstage. Time had come to a standstill. The room's 8 occupants had been completely cut off from the outside world. Finally a sound, footsteps belonging to the guards standing watch outside. He'd probably grown bored of being stuck here. None of the other hostages were as bloodied and badly bruised as Victor was. Despite feeling pity for himself, they were counting their lucky stars that they hadn't been left in a similar state. This is absolutely outrageous. Someone brave or foolish enough had broken the silence at last. I don't know who is behind this or the person that they're looking for, but whoever owns this godforsaken mansion shall be hearing from me until I have dragged every last penny out of their pockets. The makeshift press gang from earlier had probably discovered their species only after yanking off their mask, and thus had been thrown in with the other foxes just to be safe, the reason being that they had seen too much for their own good. That's very lawful of you, sir. Personally, I would have been given money to keep quiet once we're released. I would accept it, no questions asked. I'm averse to bribery. The Wolverine was taken aback by the passive-aggressive answer. All right. You have money already. Don't you? That doesn't look like a cheap costume. I made it myself. It's quite cheap if you know the right people, and it's none of your business. Well, forgive me for not singing your praises. My voice isn't what it used to be. Oh, piss off. I tried to tell myself you nobles weren't all cunts, but I've been proven very wrong this evening. Knock it off, both of you. It's pointless arguing. The other fox grumbled. I'm sorry, I'm in such a foul mood. I didn't mean a word of it. Who do you think that they're searching for anyway? The wolverine pointed at Victor. Him, by the looks of it. The bandit turned his head away. Now wasn't the time to be subjected to 7 strangers' judgments. Those ruffians really did a number on you. If we could help in any other way, we would. Leave me alone, please. Upon hearing his desperate tone, the others had mercy on him and went back to muttering amongst themselves. Victor buried his face in his hands. If that personage parading as simple guests had been able to lure him in so easily, surely they must have succeeded in capturing the other bandits too. This had to be Lysander's doing. He'd been desperately trying to retain some hopeful thoughts, but these were pointless against the worst fantasies that had vividly formed in the corners of his mind. He could picture the others rotting away in a cell just as he had years before, all their hopes and dreams of a better life gone. Cedric being forced to live with that disgusting lying day after day, and himself being led uphill to the gallows, climbing the wooden steps and feeling the rope tied around his neck. He had to fight the urge to throw up. He didn't care about himself. He never really felt particularly afraid of dying. It was the thought of being torn apart from his lover, of not being able to help him, that hurt him the most. The thought that this casual interaction with the coyote earlier was the last exchange the two would have ever had. A wave of rage hit him. What had he done to deserve this? Was there any justice left on this vile planet? He slammed his foot on the wooden door. It rattled noisily but remained firmly in place. Oi, don't you scum try anything funny, or I'll slice your hands off. The ox outside was sick of putting up with all the moaning and arguing that he'd been hearing from the last hour. Dirty fox bastards. His fellow guards were free to roam the giant hallways and secretly indulge in a drink or two. Well, there he was, stuck at the back of the building in a depressing-looking corridor. To be fair, he hadn't been left to fend for himself. 5 guards in total had been assigned to the tea room door. The rooster, their superior, had told them theirs was one of the most vital jobs that evening. Following this grand statement, he'd been asked if that meant that he'd receive a higher pay in return. This, of course, was met with a vague and dismissive answer. God forbid that they should toss an extra shilling our way. The British economy would crumble. Thus, they had barely lasted half an hour before his companions had started to protest, grumbling about the need to stretch their legs or go out for a smoke. And the end result was him standing there on his own like a fool. A cry for help broke the silence. His ears twitched and his head turned with a jolt. Who's there? What's happening? Hortentus and Elizabeth appeared and stumbled towards him in a panic. Oh, sir, please help. A fire has broken out in the main hall. We can't get out. This was met with an eye roll. Oh, please, go bother someone else. The guard's instinctive response was to be skeptical, but as soon as the woman had caught up to him and the sound of their footsteps had ceased, the distant commotion coming from the front of the building reached his ears. What's more, their costumes smelled of smoke. Blimey, you're not joking. How bad is it? It's really bad. Please come with us. You must know of a way to get out of this place. What a funny twist of fate that thanks to the job that he'd been assigned to, he was now in a safe area than almost everyone else in the mansion. Forget those free drinks, he'd escape a massive fire unharmed. Well, I'll be damned. Follow me, ladies. The ox marched off confidently with 2 women in pursuit. He pointed them towards an exit and then considered what his best course of action was. Should he get back to the station and wait in case the fire was miraculously dealt with? Perhaps he could stand halfway between the room that he was guarding and the closest exit. There was a flash of green. The moment that he turned the corridor, Cedric emerged from the shadows and threw himself at the guard, tossing a punch to his face with all of his strength. There was a loud crack upon impact. Next, a moment of silence. The guard flew backwards, hovering in midair. Although he seemed to go by in slow motion, it didn't last long. He landed headfirst into the ground with a loud and a messy thud, knocking a table and a flower pot over in the process. He didn't move a muscle. The coyote had knocked him out clean. Good grief, Cedric, that was a lot. The bandit was only half listening. He bent down, reaching for the keys tied to the victim's belt. Trust me, these people deserve it. In an instant, they found themselves in front of the door the ox had been guarding. Victor, it's me! Cedric yelled out, turning the key and frantically pushing against the door with his shoulder. A moment later, there was a click and the door unlocked. Cedric threw himself at it, causing it to burst open and slam against the wall. Luckily, none of the hostages were close enough to get hit. As soon as he sighted Victor, the coyote rushed to him and cut the rope binding his hands and feet with the tiny dagger Ridley had hidden in his costume. His heart sank. Victor looked like a complete mess. His hair was matted, his ears hung low, dark bruises were visible across his face, and dried blood covered his white costume. Oh God, what have they done to you? The fox's eyes, however, had lit up. Cedric, I thought that I'd never see you again. Since they noticed Cedric was getting sidetracked, his friends took matters into their own hands. They were no longer questioning what was happening or why on earth a group of foxes and a wolverine were locked up in a dark room. All they knew was that this was clearly a matter of life and death, and that they wanted to help set things right. Give me the dagger, I'll free the others. The coyote handed Hortenus the weapon so that they could focus on picking up Victor. All right, everyone, listen to me. The good news is that you're all free to go. The hostages sprang to their feet in excitement, any past animosity between them forgotten about. The wolverine shook Elizabeth's hand while the fox noble thanked her earnestly. I haven't finished. We have a bit of an emergency at the moment. A fire has broken out on the first floor. Oh, for heaven's sake. The wolverine gave his new-found companion a playful jab. What an evening, eh? Things are starting to get smoky and more than a tad warm. But don't worry, you should still be able to make it across the main hall. Each of them thanked her one last time and scurried away without asking further questions. Liz, we need to go. Hortenus glanced over at Cedric and Victor. Surely there are other exits nearby. They'll both be slower than us. It wouldn't be safe for them to cross the main hall. We don't have a choice. Other exits will just lead us to the gardens, which we have to navigate in the dark. You're right, and during a snowstorm too. As they spoke, the smoke had reached them and it was getting heavier. Just whatever you do, stay safe. The coyote replied with a nod. Cedric, it has been a pleasure. Till next time. Girls, wait. How can I ever repay you? Both Elizabeth and Hortenus were already halfway down the corridor. He only managed to catch the doe's response. Come visit us in Yeovil. We'll have a tea and discuss what the hell just happened. Cedric couldn't help but chuckle. Following his positive turn of events, he had a strong feeling that this wouldn't be the last encounter. A call from his partner brought him back to reality. He slid Victor's arm over his shoulder, locking his own arm around the fox's back to get as sturdy a grip as he could manage. Can you walk, V? Victor nodded, attempting a faint smile. I think so. Hot tears were streaming down his cheeks as they both took their first steps forward. Cedric, I thought that you had. I thought that we lost, that everything was over. Cedric could feel rage bubbling up inside of him. He thought that he had me too. That piece of shit doesn't know the difference between the real person that he's dealing with and the fictionalized, helpless one that he's created in his head. By the time that they reached the main hall, it had been completely abandoned. The flames had fully engulfed the right half of the building and were spreading to the ground floor. Cedric had to rush the fox away from the area below the stairs. He could see the burning banisters were about to give way at any moment. It was unbearably hot. Looking to his right, he could see the ballroom was still standing, untouched by the flames. The same couldn't be said about the opposite direction. There was just about nothing left of the dining room. The fire had spread quickly, and that ridiculous wine fountain had proven the finishing touch. The floor was littered with glass shards, abandoned hats, masks, and pieces of fabric. I can't breathe. Come on, my darling. We're almost there. They were hit in full force by the freezing gust of wind the moment that they set foot outside. Victor let out a sigh of relief. Oh, much better. A lucky coincidence, that fire. Any idea who started it? I did. You're taking the piss, really? The coyote nodded. It was a bit of an accident. The fox was clearly impressed. I couldn't have done a better job myself. Cedric was looking for any abandoned carriage that they might be able to use to get away faster. There were none left. All the guests had taken them to flee back to town. Their own red carriage was nowhere to be seen either, but that was a good thing. and meant that there was a high chance that the others had made it back to the camp safely. The two lovers walked down the steps one at a time. When they reached the bottom, they felt their boots sink into the thick snow, covering the gravel. Cedric let go of Victor so that they could brush the snow off of his costume and pull his hood over his head. Although the storm was dying down, until that moment it had been strong enough to cover the footsteps left by the other guests. As a result, beneath the smooth and glowing white surface was a layer of slippery brown slush. Victor had gathered enough strength for his pace to grow faster, but hadn't taken the slush into account. He slipped and fell backwards. Cedric moved as fast as he could. He caught his partner before the fox's head and shoulders could hit the ground. "Careful, V." Victor was unable to contain a desperate laugh. "How romantic of you to catch me," said. The coyote was about to answer when he noticed some movements in the corner of his eye. Could it have been the girls? Anyone sensible would have left by now. He turned his head to look at the burning building behind them. There was no reason for anyone else to still be there. Unless the reason was to follow him and Victor. He prayed with all his might for it to not be who he thought it was. The fox began to fidget, attempting to pick himself up on his own. "What is it? What's happening?" There he was, like a demon out of hell. His black cape flapping behind him like a pair of wings. Nothing but hatred left in his eyes. A beast ready to kill. To be continued. Wow. So, it seems that Lysander has finally caught up with Cedric and Victor. And I'm pretty sure that what happened was probably not how Lysander was hoping that it would go. He was probably hoping that he could somehow trick Cedric into agreeing to go with him in exchange for releasing Victor and the gang, but he was probably wasn't going to release Victor. He probably was fully intending to kill the guy and probably the rest of the bandits. And he probably never envisioned that one of the house that his family owns was going to burst into flames. But yeah, I guess life is what happens when you're busy making plans, Lysander. I don't know how they're gonna get out of this, and I also am curious where Dion is and Hollis, because well, it does look like Blake, Ridley, and Selwyn escaped. There's still, at least two people missing from that group, which would be Hollis the tiger and Dion the hyena. I'm assuming that they're either still looking for Cedric and Victor, or maybe they also managed to get out. But since we didn't see what happened to them, my assumption is that they're still there. And maybe they might play into what's going to happen between, the confrontation between Lysander, Cedric, and Victor, where maybe Dion will appear and will just steamroll over the lion. So it's just very curious as what's going to happen. And considering what we're seeing, I'm wondering if this is actually the second to the last update because the way that it's worded in the itch.io devlog, it makes it seem like this is either the second to the last one or the one right before the second to the last one. But considering what's happening, I feel that this is the second to the last update. So the next update will be the finale for A Fall from Grace. Also, it kind of makes sense why Cedric is holding the mask, the Plague Doctor mask, in the main menu. And I used to think that it was because that's Victor's mask, but no, that's Lysander's mask. That's the one that he was using in order to sort of, in his own creepy way, be Victor and be like, hey, look, I can be your bandit too. Look, I can dress the part and, get him in and trick him. But yeah, Lysander is clearly obsessed. He's not in love with Cedric. He is obsessed with Cedric because Cedric probably represents something that Lysander deeply, deeply, deeply wants, but he is too much of a coward to try to get it himself. And despite the fact that he is basically trying to get it by, killing Victor and basically tricking Cedric into being forced into basically being with him, he, instead of saying like, hey, you know what? I like you, Cedric. I'm sorry I was such a dumbass. Please come back with me. And the guy says no. So like, okay, fine. I will find my own Cedric somewhere else, Instead, he's like, I'm going to use all my power, all my money that I have at my disposal to force this guy to be with me instead of to have the guy want to be with me. But no. And now he's probably going to try to shoot them because he had a flintlock pistol. But again, Dion and Hollis are missing. And considering that they're the two of the biggest guys, they're probably going to be the ones that like come up and, rescue them. I'm assuming. Anyways, now on to what I had mentioned, One Last Night. Unfortunately, it seems that One Last Night is on permanent hiatus. And you're going like, well, wasn't it already in hiatus? Yes. What I mean is the story is now permanently on hiatus. There is no plans right now of moving the story forward, which sucks, I know. And it's because the story was started at a point in time where the writer and everyone else that was involved with the project was, they fully had their own, they had the time in order to work on the visual novel. But now, as time has progressed, unfortunately, they are off doing their own things. They're busy. And unfortunately, they cannot continue working on the visual novel. So One Last Night has officially just gone on permanent hiatus indefinitely. I believe that they made certain scripts that were going to eventually become, like part of the visual novel, public on their Patreon. So if you want to read that, then, you could go to Patreon and like look at the script and see like what was going to happen in the story, et cetera, et cetera. And it sucks because that was one of the stories that I really liked reading, and it was a very interesting world, and like how the stuff was happening, how the main character's trying to look for their lost husband, boyfriend person who apparently may or may not be alive, and then the issue with the bats, and like how they basically were in a bunker for years until they finally managed to get out, and yeah, everything. Unfortunately, like I said, the project is indefinitely on hiatus. I hesitate to use the word that it's dead, but it kind of was the devlog kind of worded it like saying like that they don't really know if they will ever be able to continue the story. So yeah. Eden's Reach, on the other hand, is still working. So like they're still doing stuff, and I think, don't quote me on this, I think that we're gonna get new sprites for the characters, so they'll be updated soon. But yeah, that's pretty much it, I suppose. Anywho, so what were your comments on A Fall from Grace? What just happened? Write it down in the comments, and thank you all for watching/listening. If you would like to play A Fall from Grace or Eden's Reach, you can do so by going down to the link in the description, which should have a direct link for the itch.io page where you can download and play the games yourself. And if you would like to support the projects, I will also be linking down their Patreon, where you can subscribe and get early access to builds of the projects and I guess get behind the scenes or whatever that they offer. And if you would like to support the channel, you can become a channel member and you get earlier access to these videos as they're being scheduled. And that's usually like 2 weeks in advance, maybe a week and a half in advance. So yeah, you really don't have that much long to wait. But like, yeah. I do have some other stuff in there that's like channel member only stuff. I do want to add more eventually, but I'm super busy. But yeah. If you can't do the channel memberships, you can do Ko-fi. That's appreciated. Any donation, any support is appreciated. You can also like and subscribe. Also, I have a throne in case you're feeling overly generous, but like I know a lot of us are a little short on money, so like yeah. I don't fault you for not being able to do that. But yeah. Anyway, so I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.